Hi, recently I've been using the Octatrack quite a lot with the MIDI, and I think the MIDI mode on the Octatrack has actually quite a lot to offer. So I thought today I'm going to share some ideas for fun things to do with MIDI on the Octatrack. So here we go. First, maybe a word about how I have things set up here. I've got the microfreak connected to the Octatrack, and I've got this first MIDI track here set to channel 6. This is where the microfreak receives MIDI, so when I enter something into the sequencer, the microfreak will play this. Now, one thing I like to do is use the LFOs as kind of arpeggiators. Let me show you what I mean. Here in the LFO menu, we'll leave the destination at note, and then when I dial up the depth here, maybe enter something into the sequencer. This will give me a different note every time this guy gets triggered, because the LFO wave is at a different point each time. Yeah, probably makes more sense with some more triggers. Now, I don't get precise control over the notes, but what I can do is in the ARP menu here, use this quantization setting. So it will only play notes, for example, of a D major scale. The LFO is bipolar, so it goes above and below this note I have set right here, the C3. If I don't want that, I could go to the LFO trig menu, and there's no looping half shape, but I could set it to sync half. Now it starts over every time the pattern repeats, but it's only doing half of the LFO shape. If I were to speed this up. This will always start at the C3 and then go up from there. So when I change this note here, the entire arc changes along with it. Now, by accident, I just set this to a triad basically, but it's a bit hard to control what exactly is happening, but I think that's kind of the cool thing about this, because you get to choose the general shape of the LFO, and what you can also do is combine multiple LFOs. So for example, if I were to add a second LFO with the same destination, give this maybe this ramp up shape and make it really slow, what happens here is it still will go up and down in the same way it did before, and re-triggering this every time the pattern repeats. But at the same time, over the span of time it takes this LFO2 to complete a cycle, it will gradually ascend in pitch. And now it has restarted. I think that's kind of cool. Again, very hard to control what exactly is going to happen here, but nevertheless really nice. I could also lose some of the triggers to have like a different rhythm. Or I work with the probabilities, so every once in a while, just drop out a note. In general, I think the combination of a synced LFO And a free running LFO can lead to very interesting results because you're not getting a complete mess, but still you're getting some randomness in there, which is fun. Also, the quantizer in the Octatrack, it's not the most versatile. It just gives you the option of minor and major for every key. But if you're lucky, your synth offers some more possibilities. So you could restrict your ARP to just the notes of one chord or of a pentatonic scale or whatever you would like to do. But still, it's nice that it's their option to quantize things. So while I'm at it, I'm just going to add a third LFO. And here I'm going to pick a random shape. With this destination set to note, it's going to hold the value anyways. And there's going to be a new note every time there's a new trigger. So there's no need to set the trig mode to hold. This will just add some randomness to every note. Pretty slow now. You can hear where the changes are happening now that I turned up the depth. So if I were to speed this up by a lot. And depth setting at something low, it will just offset a note every once in a while. And at a high depth setting, this will basically overtake, and you're not going to be able to hear the smooth triangle shape, but just random notes. Which can also be interesting, but I'm gonna dial this back again. I think in the depth setting here, 1 just equals 1 semitone. And the quantizer, by the way, works in a way that it corrects the note to the nearest correct one below the one that's dialed in. So if I were to set this to 2, the maximum offset would be a minor third below or a major second above. A different way to achieve a very similar thing is to use the ARP itself. In the note menu, I'm going to set this to something long, so the ARP will keep playing over the course of the entire pattern here. And then I have to turn the ARP on. Because this note only changes whenever there's a trigger, even though we have multiple notes in the ARP. It's only going to change at the beginning of the pattern. But a way around that is to, instead of the note destination, use the transpose destination. What's happening now is that the root note will change every time this guy triggers, so every bar. And even with the trig setting for this LFO2 set to 3, this will change only at the beginning of a bar. So we get a different chord for every bar. Now it's pretty slow, this guy, but I could speed it up. So we get a new root note every time. It doesn't really matter if it's way too fast, because this guy is like the hold of a sample and hold. So we've got this ramp up LFO shape, and every time the pattern repeats, it's gonna hold this value until the next time we reach this first trigger. It's just not gonna seem like it's ramping up in pitch anymore with the LFO being so fast. Now here we can't lose individual notes. The ARP's just going to keep playing. We could do something with an LFO designer or parameter locks on the volume or on the trigs. That could easily work. Oh, well, let me just show you. If I were to add one of these guys, this dimly green lit trigger is a lock trig. and this will not trigger a note, but we can add a parameter to this guy. So if I were to set the volume, for example, or how do I do this with MIDI? Well, I guess could set the velocity to 1, and then on the microfreak here, I would have to set the velocity amp mode all the way up. And then I'd have to add another one to bring back the volume. So it's not completely gone now. We can still hear it a little bit, but it might be actually nicer than to have the volume completely drop out. Let me copy those two and add another one back here. So this one as well. And I think the log trigs work with the probabilities as well. So I could set this to half or around half. So lots of things you can do with that. What I could also do is adjust the note length. So the ARP will, for example, only play for half a bar with this set to half, which is, I don't know, 50 or something like that. With this set to half, we get a little pause back here every time. Could also be nice. Or I could sacrifice this sample and hold on the note value here, because we don't really need it with this being random anyways, and assign this to the note length. So we get a different length every time. Dial up the depth a little bit. For little random melody fragments, I could add an entire new trigger back here. Maybe increase this even further. To get rid of the stiffness with the pattern always starting on the 1, and then I could add probabilities to those. I could make the whole sequence longer, and maybe in the second part, no, put one right here, and yeah, maybe add some probabilities to these guys. And what's happening now in the second part is because I have the shape set to half for this guy, determining the shape of the ARP. Because the trig setting is set to sync half, it's only going to play half of the LFO shape once, and then not anymore until we get back around to the start of the pattern. What I would have to do, I think there's no looping half shape. There's only the trigger half shape, which could work. Let me try. Yeah, this does work. This way it gets triggered by every one of these red guys. So we start at the same note, or would start on the same note if there weren't an additional LFO randomizing this note. So that's one option for this, or I could set it to trig, just the normal sync trig, which would again mean that it goes both ways, positive and negative. So that's why you can hear such low notes again now. If we want to lift those notes back up again, I could just increase the note value here. And then maybe decrease this depth to only half as much, because we're getting twice the range now with the LFO being bipolar. So just a lot of things you can do with this, and fun things to experiment around with. One thing with the Octatrack is you most often don't get a whole lot of visual feedback. You can't see how fast the LFOs are, you cannot see what notes you're getting. But I think the best way to deal with this is just to make the best out of it, because oftentimes it's nice to not have visual feedback. It forces you to listen and just see what happens, or listen to what's happening and listen for that one thing that you really like instead of looking at it. That's MIDI LFO Arps. A really fun thing to do. And now I've got to run, but I'll be back and talk about some more things. MIDI on the Octatrack.